Everyone, welcome to the Perinatal Quality Network's live event. This is the second of our webinars that we'll be hosting over the coming weeks and months to support perinatal services across the country during this difficult time. For anyone not familiar with the network, we sit within the Royal College of Psychiatrists and set standards of care for inpatient and community perinatal services. Then work with members to identify examples of good practice and areas for improvement. We'd also usually offer a series of events and networking opportunities. So, in the absence of face-to-face contact, the aim of these webinars is to provide a space where teams can share experiences and discuss new ways of working. Before I hand you over to Mark, who will be leading today's session, I've just got a couple of quick housekeeping bits to go through. The session is a live event, so your microphones and cameras will be turned off for the duration of the talk. The webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the CCQI webinars webpage. Please use the chat function to ask any questions you have and vote for the ones you want answering the most. You can also use the chat box to let us know if there are any other topics you would like covered in one of our webinars. So now I'm going to hand over to Mark Williams, who will be going to talk to us about the importance of fathers' mental health. Mark is a keynote speaker, author, and international campaigner. In 2004, he himself experienced anxiety depression while suffering in silence for years until he entered community mental health services. Mark is passionate about fathers' mental health and why supporting all parents' mental health will have better outcomes for the family and the development of the child. Mark founded International Fathers' Mental Health Day, which is today, and the hashtag #HowAreYouDad campaign for better services for new dads. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good introduction. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, today is International Fathers Mental Health Day. So we're a couple of doctors around the world, you know, obviously doing their own thing. But yeah, like I come from a personal experience nearly 16 years ago now, and I didn't know nothing about mental health back then. And after 22 hours labour, I remember the doctors come rushing in and they said, your wife needs emergency C-section. We need to get down to theatre quick. And it's the first time I actually had a panic attack. And from that experience then going into the theatre, obviously I honestly thought my wife and baby was going to die in that situation. So Michelle went on to have severe postnatal depression where she had a mother-baby unit, which I'm campaigning for in Wales. Believe it or not, we haven't got one yet open. And also then I suffered in silence, suppressing all those feelings. And my personality totally changed in the first year of fatherhood. And that's very common in new dads as well, because like you said, it was a case of I was using negative coping skills, like avoiding situations. And I didn't initially bond with my son, but I think that bond and attachment grew because I was home for 6 months. I was expecting to be back in work in 2 weeks. And obviously the financial pressures, that transition to fatherhood, the identity change where I could go to the gym. Obviously it was no way I could actually go anywhere really because my wife was so unwell. And when Michelle was in crisis teams as well, obviously I had a lot of family support involved then. But I suffered for years after that. I wasn't the same person going back to my previous role because the pressures were different. I couldn't cope with those pressures. So I changed my career and I went down in mental health. There was a young suicide, unfortunately, in Bridgend. It was a big media storm in 2007-8, and I was slowly starting into youth services. I was starting to educate myself on mental health, and went on a suicide assist course, mental health first aid, and then started working in hospitals then, but I still didn't get the help because I thought if I go to the GP, then you know, it'd be on my notes and I wouldn't get a job in mental health. So I suffered on until eventually I had a breakdown after my mother was diagnosed with cancer and I lost my grandfather with dementia in weeks of each other. My mother's fine now. And because I hadn't dealt with the timeline of trauma or anxiety and even all the things that I thought I dealt with, and yeah, basically my body just shut down. And I was physically fit during this time, but mentally it was impacting on my physical health as well. And it wasn't until I set up a group after speaking with my father, it was weeks after my breakdown, I tried to get out of bed and I managed to get to the gym, and I said, this gentleman, can I borrow the weights? And he said, yes. And he said, I got to go to NHS Prams. And I said, I'm working in a hospital in Cardiff. What's NHS Prams? And he said, my wife has postnatal depression. And I said, no way. I said, my wife had postnatal depression too. And all of a sudden, side by side, we had this conversation. And that's all it was. It was a conversation. And I found that Brian, unfortunately, went through, losing the house. He lost his business, looking after and caring for his wife, Hillary. So I don't mind me mentioning his name because he's done a couple of books, films with me. But what made me feel better, because I understood that somebody else had experienced what I experienced as well. I felt guilty at that time. So I said, fathers reaching out. Now, fathers reaching out was only support fathers with their partners with postnatal depression. That's all it was. But I was finding sometimes his only dad was struggling, and it was impacting mum's mental health. And that was impacting on the relationship. And then, like a lot of men, they were drinking, they were taking drugs, avoiding situations, overworking. It was negative coping skills like self-harming. I remember, punching a sofa when in the first year of fatherhood. And I remember his most loneliest time for me as a man, that first year of fatherhood, the postnatal period, as we know. So yeah, went to Dr. Jane Hanley, who's been in it for 33 years, Jane has, and I was explaining, the situation I was in, and she was asking me how do I know all this about the fathers, and they were telling me, and the mums as well. So we started writing journals, and we got a book and different things, and it's just escalated from there, really, since 2012. And I've actually learned off the parents, really, even though I've got a personal experience. But I think sometimes they've opened up me more because they understand that I've gone through similar, and some fathers I spoke to far worse. But what I will say is that PTSD is, birth trauma is huge amongst fathers. I think mine was a lot mild anxiety compared to some fathers who get the nightmares and flashbacks. But PTSD, as we know, is an anxiety disorder, and that's either witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. That's what it is. So a lot of these fathers are witnessing this in the labour ward and don't get the support first time round. Next baby comes along, obviously the anxiety is going to be higher now, because now they've got to go into a labour ward where they witness that trauma as well. So there's loads of reasons why fathers can actually suffer during that first year of fatherhood as well. I think you can take me to the next slide there. So this is why I actually do these talks. We know the biggest killer under 45, or some say 50 now in the UK, is suicide. And the World Health Organization actually says that there's 600,000 male suicides every year. Every year. But there's nothing on the World Health Organization yet about paternal mental health, I mean maternal. So that's why we need to start getting information out, not just for professionals, but educate parents as well, because a lot of fathers don't even know they're going through this. And then, like mums, when I was an advocate for mums years ago, they go into other services years later and they only get diagnosed with anxiety, depression or PTSD. But sometimes it's, if it was screened, or I should say supported, or had a conversation and innately, as well as in the postnatal period, they would have found out that the early prevention would have, and support would have been there for, well, but it's getting better. So like you said, this is, killing men, this is, and a lot of fathers in the research have found as well that up to 47 times more risk of suicide as a dual diagnosis around the perinatal period than at any other time in a man's life. And we know that fathers are in the same timeline as their age as non-fathers, of course they're higher. So there's loads of factors, like I said, that transition, and actually testosterone actually lowers during this time. There's research that says that. And even as we know with testosterone, that can cause fatigue and depression on its own. So there's loads of factors. Some of the big factors in fathers, undiagnosed disorders. So you've got bipolar, schizophrenia, clinical depression, ASD, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, it goes on and on. They self-managing that, and then of course the lack of sleep has an impact on your mental health, even if you're not self-managing those disorders. And now you're not just looking after yourself, your own mental health, now you've got to look after a baby as well. So there's loads of things that happen during this time. Even the pressures of fatherhood has totally changed when my fathers are mine, my grandfathers, and our beliefs as well stems from our fathers and my grandfathers as well. You've got the old traditional dad, and you've got the modern day dad, and sometimes you've got a modern day dad and traditional dad, and they overlap. So as we know, there's more stay-at-home fathers and single fathers than ever before. Mum now is in work, but dad is home with the baby, and that's why it's so important that we have to look at the dad's mental health more now, because it has an impact on our child. If dads don't feel motivated and feel anxious and depressed, like I said, there's no such thing as a perfect parent or mum and dad. We want to be good enough, and I think if we can give these positive coping skills and look after both parents for the mental health, of course it's going to have better outcomes for our child in it. So if you go to the next slide there. So these are things like the reason why I got that slide up as well, because we had a conversation, so it was in 2016 with William, Prince William, I should say, and only recently he came out. Obviously, a lot of things have triggered off during this time. There's a good documentary on BBC. I think it's Mental Health and Football, and a lot of fathers' stories actually on there as well. So, like I said, it didn't discriminate. Everyone should have a basic knowledge of perinatal mental health. That's the other thing. I do a lot of training now, basic awareness with Jane and other listening visits. And I think that everyone, we know about the mental health first aid, but everyone working with families and organisations should have a basic knowledge of perinatal mental health, what it is, how it impacts on mum and dad. As we know, 1 in 10 fathers actually are getting postnatal depression. That's over 74 studies. I think it's over 22 countries, 5 continents, and that's over the average. So, and up to 50% of fathers will actually get depression looking after their partners with postnatal depression as well. Well, my argument is, well, if it's only dad was struggling, well, it's got to be up to 50% for mums are going to get impacted. Because when I had depression, actually, my wife's depression came back now because now she was caring for me and worried about me as well. I was never diagnosed with any PND or PTSD, never, but I was actually diagnosed with a disorder called ADHD. So, I'm 40 when I was diagnosed. I'm 46 now. I know I don't look it, but on a serious note, I was self-managed that disorder all my life. Like I said, the baby comes along, lack of sleep. My wife got severe postnatal depression. Should have my baby unit. I witnessed a traumatic birth. Financial reasons. Couldn't tell my friends, couldn't tell my wife how I was feeling because it didn't want to impact on her mental health. So we suppress all these feelings, and that comes out in, as we know, in anger as well. And we got to start showing our emotions as well as men as well. It's always been, man up and, boys don't cry. But what I found with working with fathers, when you put them in a safe place with proper safeguardings and a bit of empathy, men do talk. They do actually talk. So, like I said, it's a big myth men don't talk. Once you get a conversation and you've got somebody with lived experience or somebody who understands it, they will actually talk out as well. My work's always about parents, really. So if nobody was shouting for mums 10 years ago, when only dads, I'll be known for maternal mental health more now, because I know it's simple when you think of it, that if we can get all parents support in the antenatal period as well as the postnatal period and beyond, it has far better outcomes. It does interlink with loads of other areas as well, which I'm not going to go into today. Absent fathers, we've got adverse childhood experiences. We've got loads of reasons why it does interlink as well. Parental alienation, a lot of fathers who want to see their children, but they struggle with their mental health, and because they presented that they're not good enough. So it interlinks with a lot of things. But if we can get our support in place beforehand, before it gets to crisis point, and I'm sure it'll have far better outcomes as well. So some of the reports have said up to 39% of fathers want this support for their mental health, and some have said 1 in 5 fathers, British fathers, have felt totally isolated in the first year of fatherhood. That's November report. Mental Health Foundation did a report on young fathers. 39% of young fathers wanted support. NCT, 38% of fathers were concerned about their own mental health, and 73% of fathers were concerned about their partner's mental health. And out of that came isolation, financial responsibilities, lack of sleep, loads of factors, like I mentioned just now as well. So if we can go to the next slide. So these are some of the, when it comes to paternal mental health, up to 47 times more risk of suicide during the perinatal period than at any other time in a man's life. Obviously, that's a diagnosis, like I just mentioned. So that's a big figures when you think of it, yeah. And, like I mentioned, so many men are actually undiagnosed with disorders. I've spoken to fathers who would have been diagnosed with postnatal depression or witnessing traumatic birth, and they were just diagnosed with anxiety or depression. So like I said, this is so important to screen, or whatever language you want to use, screening fathers, talking to fathers, because at least we know what factor that could happen, how it manifests, because it does manifest to the point where they are actually going on to take their lives. But some fathers have made a plan. Some fathers have, high rates of the thoughts of suicide when somebody's stressed. And as we know, stress leads to anxiety, depression, and the biggest killer in men under 50 as well. So like I said, it's the other reason why I also campaign is that I found that the four fathers who I've spoken to have, how put this, the intrusive thoughts mean that we know about maternal OCD, but the dad's thinking, they're going to do something to the baby, the intrusive thoughts, and then they take themselves out of the situation and they go down the pub, or they try and avoid that situation. They can't tell their partners how they think they're feeling, because at the end of the day, they worry about social services as well, so all the thoughts of mums are worried about. Of course, dad's worrying, am I good enough to be a dad, or this low self-esteem as well. So I think some of the resources I want to show you, tell you today as well. It's all great raising awareness, but we have to have support and pathways of care in place. And unfortunately, at the moment, NICE guidelines, CG 192 NICE guidelines, has not got no pathway for dads at the moment. There's no mention of fathers yet. The World Health Organization, like I mentioned, there's nothing on their website about paternal mental health, but we know there's risk of suicide to men, up to 600,000 every year. We know that a lot of these fathers are not actually recorded as suicide either, because they've drunk themselves to death. They've done all sorts, because of the stigma around suicide as well. So we know that suicide in men is far higher than that, because they don't want to put shame on their family. And I've seen that coming from Bridgend, how it affects the community as well, not just the family members, as we know as well. So like I said, the biggest thing is actually having a conversation with all parents. We need to start asking dad, through technology, whoever does it, maybe the workplace. We know that maternity services are stretching as it is. We need more help visitors and midwives, but we need a change of practice. Even if we can have a conversation with dad, in that time, how are you doing? What's going on there? At least he feels part of that process as well. Because some of the fathers I spoke to, I've never had that conversation with any health professionals as well. So it's about having a conversation, because my wife works in mental health now. I work in mental health. My son is more likely to open up to me now, because we have conversations about mental health. And we got to understand with mental health is that we got good mental health, and unfortunately we got poor mental health as well. So we got to start changing the language as well around mental health. Don't assume mental health is just depression, anxiety. No, it's good mental health, as we know, and bad mental health. And we need to put these positive coping skills in first before we take the negative ones away, because without going too much into this, yeah, a lot of fathers I talk to actually just, can't cope with all the things that's going on in this short space of time. So I know I'm coming up to 20 minutes, and I think I got another slide. Oh, I've done a TEDx talk. So it's only an 11-minute presentation, because you don't get long on TEDx, but it gives you some information. And also you might have a dad, you can use his TEDx talk, because if another father realizes other fathers going through this situation, maybe they would come out and have a conversation. We know men's mental health, people are talking about it more now as well, but especially fathers, we need to start looking at new, better policies in place. I know the long-term plan is changing, and NHS England, I'm proud to say that they are nudging fathers now, and that's only if mum has postnatal depression. It's a good step, but we want all parents, regardless of gender, same gender parents, everyone who's a parent should have our support, because they need to be given the chance to be the best parent they can be as well. So I think it's the last slide here now. So I'm just going to recap what I've just said as well. Like I said, 1 in 10 fathers suffer from postnatal depression, at least. It was 1 in 10 for years for mums. As we know, it's only changed a lot in the last 10 years, because there's more research, there's more evidence, and also then more screening and dad. But mums, we got to think of mums. You know, my work is never about taking the attention away from mums. Never have been. What I'm saying is sometimes a dad who is struggling, and it actually impacts a mum as well. So we got to think, you know, think family. Think family is the most important. Like I said, these are things, some of the things I've said about money worries, feeling guilty, not good enough as a dad. And, you know, those feelings do look different in fathers with PND around this time as well. Because like I said, men more likely to suppress those feelings, and it has to come out somehow. I think my last slide is here, I think, maybe. So yeah, so like I said, it's only just gone over 20 minutes. So I hope that's given us some insight, you know, about paternal mental health. But if there's any questions you want to ask me, anything, I'm quite open. And it's mostly I've learned from the parents really, than obviously working with the academics now as well.
Thank you, Mark. I don't think we've had any questions come in just yet, or they're just starting to come through as we speak. Before we go to the question, I just wanted to mention at the start of the session, we mentioned it's International Fathers Mental Health Day today. So is there something in particular you'd want to recommend to perinatal services on how they can give recognition to the day?
Yeah, it's actually on the Time to Change mental health calendar now, so it's a pretty it's official day now with but like you said, it's hashtag Dad's MH Day. If you're on Twitter, it's gonna be mad today. So you know, NHS, NSPCC, a lot of organisations now realising now that we can't look after dads. And if there's one thing I'll ask you to look at, is 2 videos. There's the still face experiment that's on dads. There's one for mums for years. Have a look at the still face experiment on YouTube, and also have a look at adverse childhood experiences as well, which Welsh government, I know Scottish government and England, certain parts, and have a look at those 2. I always raise awareness those 2 videos, but have a look at the still face experiment with dads, because that goes to show the why we have to start changing the conversation. I know maternity services, you know, even if we can just have a conversation with fathers, you know, something tangible. It could be posters, information, anything, and not just to educate you know, we need to educate health professionals, but we actually need to educate mums to look out for these signs. You know, do you realise that dad could be suffering, and his behaviours could interact in your relationship, and how it can impact on your family as well. So it's about educating everyone, and that's why I believe that perinatal mental health, basic awareness, you know, basic awareness should be actually everywhere really, not just in when we do health is in midwife conferences, you know, and all the other work we're doing. But I think it should be actually, that's how we're going to get this education out there. Anyone working with families should have at least a basic knowledge of how we can impact on the family members.
Excellent. We've got a couple of other questions that have just rolled in. So what do you think would be a good approach for perinatal community team staff to take to check in with dads? Often it's difficult to find space to speak to dads directly. So the Edinburgh Post-Depression Scale is validated for dads, and there's new screening tool things. I think some organisations now are changing their own pathway of care. I think sometimes it's just a case of sometimes having a conversation. You know, we got Zoom now, we got emails. I think some of the fathers just want acknowledgement that, you know, understanding, you know, they may not get the help there and then, but at least they got the information, because some fathers have had PTSD from witnessing a traumatic birth, you know, 30 years ago, and only now they're getting support for it. And in that meantime, they've lost everything. They've lost the relationship, you know, interaction with the relationship with the child, everything, you know. So it can be as simple as something tangible, have a conversation. And, you know, we've done loads of things over the years. We've used football arenas, you know, and sport events where, and, you know, playing football. I know Mental Health Foundation do one with Cardiff City now, and, you know, they play football, they have a conversation, they go around the stadium. I find men talk better side by side sometimes. So it could be as simple as like a walk and talk group, you know, I mean, for dads. And, you know, something simple, don't overcomplicate it sometimes. You know, what works, you know, and giving information, like, for instance, a lot of fathers I speak to, counselling don't work. And I try to break down these myths. I say, look, well, have you tried a different counsellor?
And you know, maybe that counsellor, you haven't got a rapport with that counsellor. And also what they ask me, what works, Mark? Well, I say to them, look, if mental health recovery was easy, we all be fine. It is hard work. But like I said, you know, I use CBT, I use mindfulness. These, you know, coping skills I never knew in school, you know, and so I've learned this after having a breakdown and in crisis. So it could be simple things. I know it sounds simple, but sometimes the simple things work, you know, when I spoke to fathers.
And then we've had a couple of questions around setting up dads groups within perinatal teams. One of the questions is around how would you recommend reaching out to those groups? So would it be online or physical groups? Have you attended one yourself? And the other questions are around how to engage and encourage people to actually engage in those groups.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, especially since lockdown now, online. And I like to see Dads Rock and Dads Matters. They do antenatal classes for dads. Now, we're not taking, you know, mum and dad going antenatal classes, but what we're saying is that sometimes they can have an extra information just with dads, and they're going for that transition of parental at the same time. And also they engage with other dads and learning off them in a fun way as well sometimes. And I think sometimes we got to think antenatal classes or antenatal anxiety as well as depression, because, you know, if we can get dad mentally, physically fit for that father, you know, that transition, then it's a less likely, well, not less likely, but there's a higher chance then he's going to be ready for that that time as well. You know, I say to fathers, you know, if you're struggling beforehand, you know, I mean, get the help. Don't worry. A lot of fathers think it they feel shameful, you know. But what's going back to your question about antenatal classes is good, really good. You know, and talk about mental health in general. I think that's what they want. Some dads may not be struggling, but at least they'll have that information, and so maybe next time around, when they do have another child, it might happen then as well. So, you know, why are we waiting for crisis points? We should have early prevention stuff in place, and it could be as simple as like an antenatal class online for dads, so they can connect with other fathers. Like I just mentioned, you know, 1 in 5 fathers are totally isolated during the first year of fatherhood. You know, because a lot of fathers, like my best friend, you know, he's got a daughter a couple of years older. He's off with his family, is going swimming with his daughter. I got a new baby. I'm not having that interaction with him then, see? So it's about building new little networks for new dads.
Excellent. So the next question is quite a personal experience from someone who's reported that their partner has turned the children against them. And they're wondering if you know of any information around parenting alienation and what advice you might be able to give to that person.
Yeah, definitely. There's a good website called Both Parents Matters as well, and I know there's a lady called Dr. Sue Whitcomb knows far more than me about parental alienation as well. So yeah, so I don't know as much as obviously the perinatal world as such, but it does happen, unfortunately. I get a couple of questions on both parents, really, you know, asking for this. Yeah, so yeah, so both parents matter. I would have a look at their website, and they've got free services on there. I think they've got free counsellors, free solicitors, I think, on there as well. So, you know, so it's not, you know, extra burden as in financially as well.
Thank you, Mark. Just a couple more questions coming in still. I think there's still lots more questions coming through as we speak. So the next one, what did you find most helpful in terms of therapy or coping skills?
I did a bit of counselling because obviously I had a good counsellor. I was lucky. And then work for me was CBT work for me. I've got ADHD, which I know now. I was in denial at first. You can imagine at 40 years of age, find out you got ADHD. Obviously, it wasn't picked up in school. You know, in the 80s, you'd have a smart, you know, it was a different way of schooling years ago. But, you know, I manage my ADHD. Then that's less likely for me to have anxiety, depression, OCD. You know, obviously, I built my confidence up, obviously, because I got a form of dyslexia as well, which interlinks. So, you know, sometimes I have more intense sort of CBT really, because if I manage my ADHD, then obviously the other symptoms of it would be better managed. So I gotta say that what works for me may not work for you either. You know, it's DBT. There's loads of different therapies out there, as we know. But the best thing advice I can give you, look, don't suffer in silence. If you don't get the support of that person, you keep trying until you get that proper support. Oh, and I will say there's some resources out there like the Hub of Hope. So that's a database where you put your postcode in and it tells you what's in the area. And you only got to look at the NHS mental health helplines as well. There's more national charities on there as well.
I think we've just got a couple of last questions. So just the last one that I can read out is a small amount of feedback from our fathers have come back and said they would be more interested in couples therapy. Is that something you think would help?
Absolutely, yeah. As you know, if somebody's depressed, when a parent's depressed, it has an interaction on each other. There, like what's it, parent-adult child? Won't go too much into that, but obviously it does have an impact. Or if you're depressed, obviously it's going to have an impact on our partner, how you communicate and things. So yeah, I think couples, like I keep saying, you know, what works is it's about trying everything. You know, and don't get me wrong, you know, I've things haven't worked for me as well. You know, but for men, you know, Andy Mann's Club is another one that goes around the country. So it works for some dads, but the biggest thing is you have to keep trying. You've got to invest in yourself. I mean, mental health recovery isn't, you know, it is an ongoing process in it as well. And even though I'm well now today, you know, obviously I have my dips, nothing like the depression I had 10 years ago, because I make sure if I get too overwhelmed or there's too much going on, I know my triggers. I know, you know, how I can take myself out of that situation, will work, you know, why I'm feeling paranoid or you know, I feel that, yeah, I mind read people's, you know, and so yeah, so CBT works for me, I think, definitely, in mindfulness and exercise, all the other things we know about as well. Right. I think it's good having a wife. Michelle works in mental health as an advocate now, so like I said, you know, it was good. But when Michelle had a treatment years later, it was more birth trauma as well, which was in a timeline. What I will say is, so the traumatic birth had a massive impact on her mental health in that first year. Mm-hmm. Birth Trauma Association, just to let you know, and the Maternal Mental Health Alliance. There's loads of resources on there. I've got to say about the Maternal Mental Health Alliance. So yeah, so make sure you have a look at those resources, and the Maternal OCD APP. You know, if it's a partner whose wife has got postpartum psychosis. So yeah, so there is resources out there for all parents, really.
That's great, Mark. With that in mind, we've had a question about having a list of resources following the talk, and perhaps what we'll do is take some of those links that you've just referred to and add it in as a slide for our members to see as a part of the recorded session. There is one last question. I hope you've got a couple more minutes to spare. So the question is, okay. I am a peer support worker working solely with dads who have mums under the perinatal mental health team. We currently offer regular phone and face-to-face support, as well as a dad's online group, all run by a team with lived experience of mental health services. If we were to look 1 year into the future, what would you envision our brand new carer support service to look like, e.g. services we can provide for dads?
Yeah, it might be a bit cheesy when I say it. I like to see more dadvocates. So, you know, actually when dad is, you know, on the ward, I mean, it takes the pressure off health visitors, community midwives. Everyone will have a conversation with their new dad. That's what I'd love to see, you know. Actually, a station in the hospitals where, you know, everyone will have that access. I know Dads Matter do some amazing work with Home Startup in Manchester. I would really have a look at that model as well, because they've really got it sussed there. I shouldn't say that if that's the right word to use. They got it right, you know. And But I think my aim is really to change the World Health Organization's paternal mental health and the NICE guidelines. That's my two things I got left. I've just changed Welsh Government policies there with new better mental health plan. They're including dads in the perinatal period. And I'm hoping the mother-baby unit can be coming back now soon as well. That's my other thing. So if that's what I've gone down, more policy changing route. And so yeah, but that's exactly, it can be simple. At least we need just have a conversation. Every father should be asked about his mental health. That's why I done the hashtag How Are You Dad, which has got a load of different resources on there as well. You know, just have a conversation and don't be afraid if he's, you know, there's no such thing that if you haven't thought of suicide, or you could even prevent it from happening as well. So don't be afraid as well. So.
Excellent. We still have some more questions, Mark, but that's all the time we have for now for this session. A big thank you to you, Mark, for putting some time aside today to take part in today's session. We can see lots of messages have poured through from people who want to just give thanks for the information that you have provided us today. For those of you watching, if you want to watch this webinar again, you'll find it on the recording on the Knowledge Hub COVID-19 Mental Health Improvement Network, set up by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, as well as the CCQI webinar page. We'll also be sending a link via perinatal chat, which you'll also share with colleagues. You can also access some of those questions on the online discussion forum that we have had posted up today as part of the webinar. If you would like to present a PQN webinar, please do get in touch. And if you have any ideas for future webinars, please let us know. We hope you found this useful, and thanks for watching.